Everyone in this room, at some point, there arose some desire to begin your spiritual search. And that's a beautiful point. And it's a mystery. And it's awesome. And it is full of promise and full of warning. But one thing that the spiritual search does is it begins to point out the traps of the material world, beginning with the body, the traps of the body, and identification with the body, and the enormity of that, the seeming solidity of that because of the flesh, how big that is, and the desires that arise in the body, and the appetites of the body, and the needs of the body, and the survival of the body. This is the primary initial focus of really the spiritual inquiry, and it's essential. This has to be faced head on. This is really facing death. We're talking about death of the body, and I speak about that most of the time. And not that the body has to die, or that the desires have to die, or the impulses have to die, or the appetites have to die, but they have to be met head on, so that the recognition of the truth of who you are is not tied up in the body, not bound, not entrapped in the body. And then the next level, of course, is the emotional traps, and they are huge because they seem much more real because they're more subtle. And they can't actually be located as a physical thing or arising from a physical thing. They just appear, as a flood of energy or withdrawal of energy or some form of emotional life. And then the mental, mental is tied up in all of it. So we even need to talk about the mental because mental is everywhere. Without the mental, there's no identification with the physical, there's no identification with the emotional, and there's no identification with the thought process. So that's the spiritual search right there, is really seeing that, meeting that, the horror of it, the impossibility of it, the frustration of it. And then there comes a time where you have to face the the spiritual body, the spiritual emotions, the spiritual thought process. And those are the spiritual traps. That's the entrapment. And everyone in this room has been entrapped by that. And you're supposed to be. That's part of it. It's not like you're not supposed to get entrapped. You are. You have to get entrapped. In all of it. In the physical, the emotional, the mental, in order to recognize even what a trap is. So since you are spiritual people, and that's a beautiful definition at the beginning. It's a way of separating yourself from the following of the materialistic, physical, emotional, mental plane. It's a way of saying no. And so this is really the crux of what I have to say. It's perfect at the beginning. It's not a trap at the beginning. It's a door to freedom. It's like, yes. And then it's a trap. Whatever it is. And the sweetest trap and the hardest traps to meet are the spiritual traps. Because they're the good ones. They've conquered the ego. I'm almost enlightened, or I am enlightened. Or there's no ego here. I'm empty. I'm happy all the time. Or the reverse of that. I'm not enlightened yet. I'm not empty. I'm entrapped. That's the trap. Those are the jaws of the trap. I am not. And so really the point is, there's nothing wrong with the traps on any level. This we usually come into the spiritual search really knowing there's something wrong with the physical entrapments and the mental and the emotional entrapments. And then there has to come a time of recognition. It's not about right and wrong. That's not what the issue is. They are what they are, period. And they're simply more than that, much more than that. And when there's an identification with that, there's a lack of recognition of what's more. That's all. It's not that they're right or wrong. They're amazing in their own right. I mean, anybody who's experienced an emotional surge or a physical surge or a mental something knows this is pretty amazing. And that's great. The dilemma, and it's a paradoxical dilemma, and that's why it sometimes appears that I have to talk in a circle and to come right back to it, because at any place there's a perfection of the recognition of it as a trap or as a door to freedom, and then there's the lie of the recognition of it as a trap or as a door to freedom. So when we get into the spiritual realm, the so-called spiritual realm, let's call it that, without being bound to that term. Well, this is why Ramana didn't speak, because finally whatever said is, it's absolutely not true. Whatever is said is absolutely not true, including this that I'm saying right now. That whatever is said is absolutely not true. Yes, and you get that, and that in itself is freedom. But if you don't get it, it's like you want to get it. And that's the bondage. So if in a moment of really being willing to tell the truth, you can see where you are tied up in something that's said or not said or felt or not felt, or realized and not realized, just in telling the truth about that, then in that moment there's choice. Not even to get out of the trap, or to change it, or to be bigger than it, but to just recognize that right here, right now, is the point of inquiry. This is where inquiry occurs. It doesn't occur in some abstract place or state. It occurs right now in this moment. It's not necessary any other time. It's not an issue. It'd be absurd to be walking around, who am I, who am I, who am I? As we know, people have done that. I mean, that's the trap of religion, the Advaita religion. It's only necessary in the moment of experiencing yourself bound, and that moment is a holy moment. Because in that moment, you're telling the truth about what it is you're doing to yourself. And doing it to yourself is not wrong. It's not an issue of right and wrong. It's just a possibility to see that there's much more. I got a very sweet letter in yesterday's batch of mail. And really with the best intentions. This letter was asking a question based on an experience she'd had with another teacher where there was a huge opening, deep opening, true opening. And then further experiences with me and just in life where there's a really opening and feeling calm, feeling happier. And her question was, is she enlightened? She wanted to know, well, am I enlightened? It is funny. It's the sweetest question, so I hope whoever wrote it is also laughing a little bit. And we could get into a discussion of what enlightenment is and what are the qualities of enlightenment and the marks of enlightenment, the signs of enlightenment. But the gift of Ramana, this huge gift of Ramana, this radical, cutting at the root gift of Ramana that was passed on through Papaji, and here is in your heart, is really turning that question back. Who is it who is enlightened or unenlightened? And if that question is truly asked, then the presence of who you are is so far beyond any question of enlightenment or unenlightenment. And then you're enlightened. But it's not the I who asks the question. You say, that's still a thought. Am I enlightened? Is still following a thought. Oh, I am because I felt oceanic just a minute ago. Or I'm not because I feel contracted right now. Oh, I am because I haven't had any bad thoughts in 3 weeks. Oh, I'm not because I'm having a negative thought. This is still referencing who you are to a thought or a feeling or a circumstance. And who you are is closer than any of that. And true inquiry, which we have been playing with here, this time together, true inquiry, is really examining all of those places where you have assigned your identity. And one of the places, one of the spiritual identities, is the identity of the one who is enlightened now, finally, so that then I can get on with my life. Or then people will be nice to me, or then I'll get some respect, or then... So if that question arises, am I enlightened? You just take a moment to be fully and absolutely and completely unenlightened. Because that's what that question is based on. Unenlightenment. Just be unenlightened. With no reaching or searching for enlightenment. Just a moment. You can go right back to the search. But just take one free moment. And tell the truth of what is experienced in that. And then if the search is pursued, it's fine. Then it's really a yogic search. You're searching to purify or modify or perfect the character or the body or the emotions or the mind. That's fine. That's a yogic practice. Different, it's not always called yoga, but it's a yogic practice. But at least in that moment, the practice won't be about getting someplace. There will already have been a recognition of what is here. When you are fully not what it is you think you have to be, if you complete your practice. If you fully directly experience the worst that you imagine, that not only are you not enlightened, but you will never be enlightened. Enlightenment is impossible for you throughout all time, and you're the only one it's impossible for you. Yes, you knew it all along, so... So to really directly experience that, then the joke is self-evident. It's really self-evident. You get the joke. You're the butt of the joke. You are God making jokes at itself. It's such a trap. And the word itself is a trance word. You hear the word enlightenment and you go into a trance. Based on what you've read, based on what you've been taught, based on what you've experienced, based on what you think anyone is saying at any time, based on what editors and translators have passed down to you throughout time, the great sages. It's like, you go into the enlightenment trance. And either I am enlightened and I can enlighten you if you do everything I say. And you're bad because you're not doing it. I've seen this with teachers. They get furious with their students because they won't get what the teacher wants them to get. Same as a parent getting furious with a child, or a child getting furious with a parent. So it just is a transference of the same old conditioning. So if we just forget that word, and we forget the word God, and we forget the word truth, and we forget the word love, and we forget the word freedom, and we forget the word that you go by as your name, and you forget the word that identifies your body as a particular gender, and it's self-evident what is closer than any word. Self-evident what is here, what is always here. Then you use any word you like, and it's informed by that evidence. You use the word I, and you're referring to your body, and it's informed by that evidence. You use the word I, and it's speaking of the totality of all being, and it's informed by that evidence of direct experience. As human beings, we learn quite a bit through imitation. As primates, we learn through imitation. And that's very powerful, of course. It's an effective way of learning, and learning quickly because it bypasses conceptualization. Just go right to imitation. That's a major part of socialization of all cultures. Deeper than that, closer than that, is what you know without learning it. And what apparently covers what you know without learning it, is everything you learn. So not only the imitative person that you become, but then the conceptualizations about that person, good person, bad person, unenlightened person, enlightened person. All of that covers what is known before learning and known before imitating. So the particular challenge in spiritual gatherings is that to recognize that the tendency is so profoundly ingrained to imitate being something, to learn something that can define who you are supposed to be or who you're supposed to become. I mean, we know that from our churches and our schools, but we get fed up with that, and so then we generally turn to something else. A different church, a different school. Finally, it gets down to, are you willing to not have anything that you can cling to conceptually? So the challenge is, then when we come together with all of these different concepts and imitative behaviors floating around and anchored in the mind. The challenge is to surrender to what's deeper, to what's closer, to what you know without any conceptualization of that. Who you are without any image of that. What you are deeper than any sense of that. Then we can have a conversation that has never been had before. I mean, we will use words that have been used and concepts that have been used, and we can play with imitative behavior. But there's a conversation, heart to heart, that doesn't need a checklist of, are you saying it right? Are you feeling it right? Are you understanding it right? Are you doing it right? A conversation that just is unknowable. A discovery that in the willingness to have that conversation, there is already a wisdom and an intelligence and a beauty and realization that simply in your willingness to be reveals itself.
Somewhere along the line, I developed a belief system that that tells me that I shouldn't be feeling much of or thinking much of anything.
Everyone in here has got to see this one. Whether that somewhere along the line was starting in grammar school or before, or starting in your church, or starting in the new church that you went to after you left your old church, or starting into your no church after you left the belief system. This is very important. It has something to do with I should be different from the way I am. Because Jesus was like this, or Buddha was like this, or Ramana was like this, or my idealization of myself is like this. And so therefore I should be feeling something I'm not feeling, or not feeling something I'm feeling. Can everyone relate to this? Good. Just so I want us to be on track here. This is what I meant about taking it from the abstraction into the recognition. We like to tell stories, and stories are very useful. You know, stories are part of that's the way humans communicate. And there can be great mythic stories, metaphoric stories, which are all myths. And there's the story of you. Your life thrust has a story. It was heading in a certain direction, and then it turned around, headed in a different direction, radically different direction, but still a story about you. So there's nothing wrong with the story. We love the stories of saints and sages, and we love the stories of demons because we relate to them all. We recognize them all, and stories are teaching vehicles. But once we get to the point of that which cannot be taught, which is also that which cannot be learned, which is who you are, then at least for an instant, there has to be a discovery of what is closer than the story of you. It's not to diminish the stories. It actually makes a much better story. When the stories come forth consciously from recognizing what cannot be told about who you are, then the stories are infused. The stories are art. The stories are great. That's what makes the story of Christ such a story. It shakes us. It makes us fall down to the ground because it's infused with what cannot be told. that which is alive in you right now and is discoverable by you in an instant of recognizing the story. And there may be many levels of the story, subtle and subconscious, unknown levels, but in turning the mind toward the core, toward the deeper levels, there is discovered that which all the levels appear in, which we can call home. When you're home, you're just home. And if there's a story being told, it's being told home. At home, you can relax as you hear the story. You can relax as you tell the story. You can relax as you get terrified of the story. Because you're home. You can be naked at home. You can relax at home. You can be who you are at home. And quite amazingly, you can invite the whole world, the whole cosmos, the whole media home, where you are. And you can be yourself. And that's what we have to give one another. Then the stories that we share with one another, which can be entertaining, are infused with that. Have some real meaning, are metaphors, are descriptions, are the Shakti of what is essentially at home, at peace, here. And it excludes nothing, as you see. It doesn't exclude failure. It doesn't exclude grief. It doesn't exclude knowingness. It doesn't exclude perfection. It doesn't exclude imperfection. It doesn't exclude the body. It doesn't exclude thoughts. It doesn't exclude emotions. It doesn't exclude any circumstances, because everything is infused with that. This teaching from my teacher is often called a non-dual teaching. What non-dual truly means is all is one. All is oneself. All. But when we are busy identifying ourselves as someone who's going to get something and get something else away, we overlook that someone, besides being a fiction made up in the mind, based on images and thoughts and feelings and sensations of a body, we overlook that which is always present. That all the getting and losing and keeping away from and seeking and finding and opening and closing and contracting and expanding, that all of that's occurring in as some mysterious, exquisite, horrifying, beautiful mandala of the Shakti of God. The phrase non-duality gets used a lot in the most dualistic ways. So what a challenging phrase that is, non-duality. It's more than a word, it's a phrase. It encompasses more than just a word. So the challenge in times like this, as in all times, is to recognize that non-duality includes everything. Nothing is excluded. When most of us begin spiritual search, we begin it with the hope and the prayer to exclude all the troubles, all the suffering, all the misery. And we come to retreats to exclude the distractions from my everyday life. And that can be very useful. The initial desire to exclude the suffering, the desire to come and retreat and exclude distractions, very useful. But only transitorily useful. Only as a point of really being able to stop and welcome everything as yourself. Our minds are maybe hardwired to make one and the other. And that's the way we see it. That becomes our perspective on life. We've got it or we don't have it. We're happy or we're sad. We're right or we're wrong. We won or we lost. And that has its place, but only transitorily, only as a point of view, only as survival for an organism. Regarding true self-realization, true self, which is non-dual, realization of itself, nothing can be excluded. It literally boggles the mind, because we want things excluded from that. We want the dark forces excluded. We want suffering excluded. We want what bothers us excluded. But it's here. That means it's not excluded. And amazingly, if there is the fortitude and the willingness to simply welcome what is here without denying what is here, there is a discovery that I'm unable to speak and that I have never heard spoken or read spoken, but that is available for you now and in every moment of your life. This I promise. My teacher promised me, and somehow I was able to investigate what he promised. And he invited me to invite you to investigate. It goes against all of human conditioning, maybe all of animal conditioning. Going against, meaning it stops when the impulse says go, flee, escape, kill, hate. It stops. And instincts or emotions or commands of the physical organism appear in that stopping, or recognize to be as true as anything else. And finally are met as aspects of non-duality. So I don't do a lot of teaching, as most of you know, because what I've learned is that then people try to learn non-duality. It's already dualistic. So if you can recognize the instinct to learn it, because then it will help you get out of something, you can stop. You don't have to learn anything. Really. It's already here. It's always been here. And it is who you are. And it includes everything. Everything. Wanted, blessedly. And unwanted, surprisingly. So our conversation here this weekend is really simply to reveal what's already true and to challenge your mind in whatever concepts have arisen about what's already true, or whatever concepts appear to deny what's already true, or own what's already true, or resist what's already true. So that what is already true can be realized as true right now.
I've been watching videotapes, and a friend of mine introduced myself and my partner to you and your teachings. Well, it hasn't been but probably 2 months, and it's very familiar. That it is. And I feel so blessed to be in such a young body and have such a profound realization.
That's great. That's great. We're blessed.
Yes,
by
we
your
are.
blessing.
Yes. So I find that I have profound moments of being in this exact moment, and how there's no duality that exists except what is created when I'm not in this moment.
And is there ever not this moment?
Yes, so this is the thing, is that it's like a thought wave. It goes deep down into the depths of consciousness, and then it comes back to the surface where all the thoughts come and go.
And that occurs in this moment?
No, it doesn't.
Where?
Well, it occurs in my mind.
And where does your mind occur?
Oh, my mind is part of this moment.
That's right. Your mind is not separate, or that's, again, a duality.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's the trickiest duality, especially the spiritual seeker's duality. The mind becomes the enemy, and the no mind becomes the victory, and the war begins. But the truth is closer than mind or no mind. And there is perhaps required no mind to realize what is here. Since we're so conditioned to mind as reality, yes, there is a cut or an essential moment that's required where there's no mind. Just like when this lady came up, there's no entity, but I am. But then, in general, what happens, that becomes mind's latest acquisition. To beat. Now, no mind is superior to mind, but that no mind is still mind. You get this? Should I say it again? I don't need to. You get the spirit of it, right? Die, reply, and die again. And that's the... Because in that moment of dying, this moment, there's no duality. But how quickly we then make a duality of that. Oh, for a moment there was non-duality. Now there's duality. It's the same moment.
Mm-hmm. Sounds so simple.
It is simple. That's the challenge. Because mind has nothing to do. But what benefits come to mind too? Universal, non-dualistic benefits. Grace. Grace has no problem with mind. The nectar of realization includes everything. In our learning, and maybe just in the structure of our human brains, for survival and for other reasons, we learn to exclude. And that's appropriate. That has its place. It's a great power to learn to exclude. To learn to exclude poison from medicine. To learn to exclude what is good from what is bad. But what this invitation is to invite inclusion into your experience. Not because it's better than exclusion, not even so that it take the place of exclusion, but because we have been so trained, even maybe especially spiritually trained, to exclude, the vastness of inclusion has been overlooked. And so that even the most profound truth gets used by the mind as a way of excluding. I was speaking with a friend yesterday who's a spiritual teacher, and she's also a psychotherapist, and she said she deals with many people who have come from Advaita teachers who live in such a realm called transcendence that they exclude the human and the emotional and wonder why they're still suffering. And then they say, but who's suffering? And they return right back to the realm of the pseudo-transcendence. Because the actual transcendence includes everything, excludes nothing. And it is in that actual inclusion of everything and nothing that the unspeakable revelation of truth is recognized as who one is. So since what I say to people has been called Advaita, Vedanta, even though I don't call it that, and I have never called it that, when I have read about myself in certain publications, I have noticed that I'm classified as an Advaita Vedantist. I want you to know I'm not, although I don't exclude it. Advaita Vedanta is profound and exquisite and true. Absolutely true. In the realms of the absolute, in the realms of totality, in the realm of totality, absolutely true. But the moment one identifies oneself as an Advaitist or an Advaita Vedantist, then one is not something else. And that's not true. Then the old mental game of classifying, which relies on exclusion, comes into play. And that, of course, gives rise to what we know of in all religions as fundamentalism. Whether it's the religion of the ego, or the religion of Christ, or the religion of Buddha, or the religion of Ramana, or the religion of Muhammad, doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. It becomes a fundamentalism which excludes everything but itself as itself is defined. And that begins where you are, in the seat you are sitting in. That begins with the religion, the fundamentalism of yourself as separate from anything else. As yourself as separate from anything born, anything that dies, or that which is unborn and undying. All of it. So in our time together, the daunting task, which perhaps exquisitely is doomed to failure, is to speak what cannot be spoken, has not been spoken. To speak in a language that by its nature is exclusive, what is absolutely and relatively inclusive. To include you, even the meanness of you, in the truth of the totality of the no-thingness of you. The absolute truth, never ever being separate from the relative. And if for just an instant there is a release into that, then you are both yourself and everything else. You are both not yourself and beyond anything else. Then we can really use these old words, the all, the everything, the nothing, and they have the meaning that comes from direct experience rather than some abstraction of learning. The result from that cannot be charted. The look of that cannot be imagined. The feeling of that cannot be imagined, although it all is imagined, and it's imagined in the realm of exclusion. Well, it wouldn't look like that, it wouldn't feel like that, it wouldn't feel like this. It would feel more like I felt when I felt that. And that's the trap. That trap opens in a moment of the willingness to include everything and more, nothing and more and less. So in particular meetings, particular conversations arise and things are said that are particular to that meaning and yet can generate out into time so that they're relevant to someone listening to a tape or reading a book or an interview. But it's always important to recognize that if what you are reading or seeing or hearing in this moment or any other moment is taking you to the path of further exclusion, then it is not what I'm speaking about.
Well, there's this constant, like, we're wanting to capture this with
Yes,
the mind.
but what else is happening? Because that's not constant. That appears,
Yeah.
and then it drops, and it appears, and then it drops.
What else is happening? It's just being very happy to be here.
So can you find a separation between yourself and this happiness? When you say, I am happy, which is what we normally say, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
But rather than just continuing that, if you just stop for a moment and see, where is this I who is happy? Is there a separation between I and happy? really.
I don't think so. I think it feels like that's just it.
Yes, that's right. This is the easy one. I am happy. The more difficult, more challenging one is I am sad.
Uh-huh.
I am angry.
Uh-huh.
I am despairing. I'm unenlightened. I'm confused. I'm doubtful. If you stop making the separation between I and this state, I'm unpeaceful. If you just, as you just saw, that this I is not a pinpoint. So in that moment, it is just not peacefulness. And you let it be that, and you be that fully. Like right now, can you fully be unpeaceful?
God, that's a tough one.
Yes, you do have to work at it. But for the purposes of our experiment,
All right, let me see.
what do I need to say to you to make you be unpeaceful, just so we can experiment?
Well, you could tell me I'm unenlightened, I suppose.
You are unenlightened.
God, I know.
Right. So, I am unenlightened. Now, when you are I am enlightened, you can see enlightenment is who I am. But unenlightened, well, that doesn't feel so good, so I don't want to be that. I want to get back to I am enlightened. But it doesn't work because you are overlooking I am unenlightened. Fully, completely be who you are in this instant, absolutely unenlightened. Completely unenlightened. Totally unenlightened. What's the experience? What do you experience?
Well, that's okay, too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So one feels really good.
Uh-huh.
And we're happy to identify ourselves as that.
Right.
But that's an identification, and it's a feeling, or an insight, an experience. An experience has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It appeared and it will disappear. The good ones too. So in an infantile kind of way, we want the good ones to not disappear. It's kind of like a Santa Claus or something. We want never to feel bad again. But that's not wanting the totality of ourselves. It's fascist, actually. It's a kind of spiritual fascism, where the ugly feelings are to be sent off into some camp or death march, never to return. Only the pure feelings will be here, only the radiant feelings. So this is what Hitler said. That's what Hitler was doing. He was bringing the new age and purifying and all the other great fascists. But that fascism lives in the human mind. So in this willingness to meet this unenlightened, without sending it away, without saying, no, I don't want to be you, but saying, yes, okay, yes, you too, then unenlightenment, the ugly, the unwanted, the hated, get to come to the satsang that is consciousness. Then the totality of being, rather than some superficial idea of what's good to be. The totality of being, the totality of the universe. Not just your tribe, not just your family, not just your political party, not just your nation, not just your subculture, not just your good side, not just your angelic side. The totality of being is met. Then this trance of imagining yourself as a pinpoint in space is broken. And you recognize you are everywhere, in everything, in everybody, in every emotion. And all that's required is to stop fighting it within you. Even stop fighting the fight, if there's a fight. That's the stopping. All of our strategies and our learnings are to get away from what we don't want and to keep what we do want. But we see over time, over maturity, over evolution, it doesn't work. What we don't want comes to haunt us. What we want leaves us. So in that seeing, there's a disillusionment. And in that disillusionment, there's a possibility to examine what has not been examined before. This assumption that I am this pinpoint that bounces from peace to unpeace, from enlightenment to unenlightenment. And when that goes unexamined, the bouncing continues. When it is examined fully, completely, this is truly inquiry into what is real. And this examination is natural to you. You have learned to not examine it. Maybe you just learned it as a species, to go for what is pleasurable, to avoid the pain. This, that definitely has its place. It's definitely appropriate. But when you are concerned with the truth of who you are, it is inappropriate. There is a moment where there must be all stopping, regardless of the pain, regardless of the feeling of worthlessness or unenlightenment or stupidity or whatever it might be, whatever has been hated, the insanity, the dark, the evil, to just stop and actually meet it as yourself, to open the door of your heart so that this can be recognized. To open the concentration camp, to liberate the ideas of yourself. That's all that needs liberating. There's no self to be liberated. There's only the self that is beyond liberation. It could never be bound. But your ideas of yourself, these can be liberated. These can be set free. And they are naturally set free when they are met, and the meeting occurs in the stillness, in the silence, in the heart. Now, here.
And I understand that there's no how to stopping.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't ask that question.
Well, let's see how he asks that question.
I feel like there must be some sort of mechanics to stopping.
There are mechanics involved. The mechanics that are involved are in how you avoid stopping, how you go. There are mechanics involved. That's what I was referring to yesterday when I spoke about the choices that are available in a second. And so many of them are subconscious or unconscious because they have to do with, the physiology of the being or the survival of the being. But then there's a level of choice that has to do with the psychology of the being, of the avoidance of fear. Different from the avoidance of fear that has to do with the survival, although it may be linked up with survival psychology, but it's not really now about survival. The imprint may have been about survival as a child or whatever. But right now, it's not about survival. It's just about a replaying, a choice that keeps being made. And so there are mechanics, and it is very useful to recognize the mechanics or the structure of ego or the fixated personality and how one makes choices. Very, very useful. But the how to surrender, there is no how, because there are no mechanics involved. And this is how the great mistake gets made. In that someone wakes up and then people gather around this person that's waked up and they say, "How did you do it?" And the person scratches his or her head and says, "Well, this is what I did. I sat with this master, or I went on this 40-day fast, or I, beat myself with a whip, or indulged all of my desires, and then I waked up." And so, okay, let's do what that one did. But if you really, really examine the playing out of all those things, beating oneself up, fulfilling desires, 40-day fast, sitting with the masters, there reaches a point where you have done it all. And there is a giving up. Really a giving up. Not it may be like a defeated giving up, but it's not a defeat. Because in the defeat there's a mechanic. The giving up is a mechanic of closing down. There's a choice, well, I give up. Well, it's no good. And so it's a subtle way of giving up, but not giving up. It's the dramatization of giving up. It's the imitation of giving up. So there's still something being done. So the surrender, the giving up, the stopping, the challenge I have is in speaking about it, because it really can't be spoken about. Because whatever I say about it, the mind, since it's trained that way, is taking notes about what she really means the mechanics are of this. I had an interview this morning, and really a wonderful interview, because it was alive. It was a true question. She didn't come just doing an interview. She came to find out what it is I have to say. So she asked me what my core message is. My core message is that always, every instant, every moment, in every circumstance, silent awareness is alive in you. Not silent awareness that is in opposition to noise or speaking, but silent awareness, absolute silent awareness that includes everything, even including the thoughts that you have about who you are. The thoughts that you have about who you are not who you are. They are thoughts that appear in who you are. You are silent awareness. I've used the word silence for many years, but I realize there's it's so easy to mistake the meaning of that. Then it becomes silence in opposition to speaking, or in opposition to action. And it's not that. It's silent awareness that is aware of all speaking, all action, and aware of all non-speaking, non-action. So it is the resolution of all dualities. Not in opposition to any duality, but the resolution of duality. That's the core message. the core invitation, then our time together is really spent pointing to that and discovering, what does that mean then to you? If it's not something you learn or believe in or remember, which I advise you not to, but something you actually discover, what does that mean to your life? How does that reveal itself? She also asked me many questions, some about beliefs, belief in eternal life. I said, what if you don't believe in eternal life? Whoa, it's like, but we're a spiritual subculture. We have to believe in eternal life. What if you don't believe in anything for a moment? Dare you not believe in anything, just for a moment? If you dare, then there is a possibility of real inquiry, real investigation. There's a possibility, the capacity to discover yourself as this silent awareness. Not to believe in, because if you believe in it, that will be a thought about it. But to realize it, to realize yourself. What does that mean? I can tell you what it has meant for me. It's very good news. That's probably all I should say. It's very good news universally. But it doesn't necessarily mean that your personality will change, or that your circumstances will change, or that your emotions will change, or that you will be more quiet. It doesn't necessarily mean anything except its own good news. She also asked me if I was a missionary. That's a good question, too. I'm not a missionary at all. My mission is to simply invite you, if you are drawn and if you are curious, to investigate for yourself what is always here, what is already awake, what cannot be objectified, and yet is present. And finally, who are you? She then asked me, well, what about your teaching? I said, well, some people call me a teacher, but it's not a teaching per se. Because who you are really can never be taught. If it could be taught, it would be a thing that could be extracted and objectified and learned. And by this time we would have all learned it. Because you have heard it. You know, if you're of a particular subgroup, you have heard you're a radiant light. You're God's child. You're free. You're safe. But to hear it, even to understand it, to believe it, to memorize it, to hope it's true, is not enough. It has to be discovered directly. So my invitation today for you is that you give up all your beliefs for our meeting. Beliefs have their purpose, they have their place. There's nothing wrong with beliefs. Some beliefs are better than others. Some beliefs serve better than others, but for our meeting, if you just give them all up and you're just present as yourself, as silent awareness, then you have the opportunity to discover, is there a boundary to silent awareness? Is there a problem in silent awareness? Is there any separation anywhere? To discover this, to inquire into this, not to know ahead of time, yes or no, but to discover. Then our conversations and our meeting and our just being together will be of some use in your life. And then your life will be of some use in the collective life, the planetary life, the cosmic life.